Hi guys, so we're going to do lesson 73, which is multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. We've been working on adding and subtracting negative numbers, so this is similar but still pretty different. So we're going to start with the theoretical way, like why this works, and then I'm going to show you the shortcut way of Miss Ballard cheating to make sure that, well, it's the way I remember how to do it, okay? So first thing we're going to do is talk about on number line why this works. So if I have 2 times negative 3, it's like saying I have negative 3 that I'm adding together twice, right? So that would be negative 6. So if I were to show this on number line, it would be 0 to negative 3 would be my first part, and then negative 3 to negative 6 would be my second part, right? And that would give me negative 6. So 2 times negative 3 is like saying negative 3 2 times. So let's see. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Okay. All right, so what I want you to notice is I have a positive 2 and I have a negative 3. And I end up with a negative answer over here. Okay, I want you to keep track of that. Okay. The second one says negative 6 divided by positive 2. Well, what that means, let's say I have negative 6 and I'm dividing it by 2. So it's that whole section here. And I would divide it in half. So this would be one section and that would be one section. So I could say this 0 to negative 3, well, that's negative 3. And negative 3 to negative 6, that's negative 3 as well. So really, negative 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. Actually, I'm going to erase some of this stuff so we don't get confused later. Okay, so I can put this as negative 3 here. So I have a positive 2, but I have 2 negatives, a negative at the beginning and a negative at the end. Okay, and again, if this is like Miss Ballard, this doesn't make any sense, that's okay. I'm going to show you a shortcut in just a second, but I'm showing you why this works, okay, why the shortcut works. All right, let's say I have negative 6 divided by negative 2. Well, negative 6 would be this whole section, and if I divide it by 2, we said that was that to that, right? Well, then I have to add that negative. Remember when we do negative, it's really like saying the opposite. So it's like saying the opposite of this much. Okay, well, if we said that was negative 3 and this was negative 3 before, the opposite of that would be going this way. So it'd be positive, 2 sets of positive 3. So I end up with, oops, let's erase some of the stuff. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Positive 3. Okay, so look at this now. So I have a negative, and that gives me a positive. Okay, so if I have a negative and a positive, that gives me a negative. If I have a negative divided by a positive, that gives me a negative. If I have 2 negatives, that gives me a positive. And that's the pattern we're going to look at next. Okay, so this leads us to our general rule. All right, so you might want to pause the video once we're done talking about this and write this in some form on a sticky note to keep with you, just like stick in your book to remember this rule, okay? To know if your answer is positive or negative when you multiply or divide positive and negative numbers, okay? You need to count the negatives you multiply or divide by, okay? You don't need to worry about the positives. You want to count the negatives, okay? What that means is if you multiply or divide by an odd number of negatives, okay? So let's say I have two numbers and one is negative. My answer is always going to be negative. If you multiply or divide by an even number of negatives, so -2 times -2, I have two negatives, my answer will be positive. And this works for everything, guys. Okay, so keep track of how many negatives you are multiplying or dividing by, and that will help you figure out if your answer should be positive or negative. So here are some examples for us to work on. Okay, so I have +6 times +2. I have an even number of negatives because there are no, 0 is even, right? I hope so, at least. It's not odd. So this is going to be positive 12. A -6 times a -2. I have an even number of negatives, right? 1, 2. So that's going to give me positive 12 as well. Even number of negatives. Over here, I have -6 times +2. I have one negative, so it's going to be negative. +6 times -2. I have one negative, so it's going to be odd, an odd number of negatives, so that's going to be a negative answer. All right, same thing works with dividing. So +6 divided by +2. I have no negatives, so it's going to be positive. -6 or -6 divided by -2. I have two negatives. It's even. I'm going to end up with a positive answer. -6 divided by +2. I have one negative, an odd number of negatives. Negative answer. +6 divided by -2. I have an odd number of negatives. I have one negative. Negative answer. Okay, so let's extrapolate a little. Okay, so on these, so I did, I used our original equation and then add some more to it. So +6 times -2 times +1. I have one negative here. So that's an odd number of negatives. So that means I'm going to end up with a negative answer. Let's look at our second equation. I have +6 times -2 times -1. I have two negatives, so my answer is going to be positive because I have an even number of negatives I'm multiplying here. Okay, so I'm not going to do the actual math on this, but we're going to see if it's positive or negative. Okay, so I have +6 times -2 plus 100 times -100. Oh, sorry, that's times 100 over here. Times -100 times +2 times +2 times -3. So I have three negative numbers that I am multiplying together. So I don't know what my answer is with numbers, but I know my answer will be negative because I have three negative numbers I'm multiplying together. So they would be negative. Okay, now the book doesn't go that far, but that's the pattern I want you to see. It'll help you later on when you're doing more complicated math next year. So one more problem. Let's say we do +4 times +4 times -1 times -3 times -12 times -2 times +1. Okay, so I look through my problem again. I have a positive times a positive times a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative. So I'm going to look at my numbers I multiplied. Do I have an even or odd number of negatives? Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have an even number of negatives, so I know my answer is going to be positive something. Okay, so let's look at the actual examples then. Okay, so there's actually only one example with 4 parts. Okay, so first one is negative 12 divided by negative 4. So I'm going to count my negatives. I have 1, 2. 2 is an even number, so I know I'm going to have a positive answer. So just remember, even number of negatives is positive. Odd number of negatives is negative. So positive 3 for my first one. Number 2, or letter B, sorry, is negative 2.4 divided by 4. Well, how many negatives do I have? 1, so it's odd. So that means I'm going to have an odd answer. 2.4 divided by 4 is 0.6. Right. 6 times negative 3, I have 1 negative, so that's odd. So I know I'm going to have an odd answer. 6 times negative 3 gives me negative 18. And on my last problem, I have negative 1/2 times negative 1/2. 2 negatives would be even that I'm multiplying together, so it's going to give me a positive answer. So I know I'm going to get positive and then multiply my fractions to get 1/4. Okay, go ahead and do your practice set and then check it with the answers afterwards. Okay, so let's do the practice set. Remember, I'm counting my negatives and then just multiplying from that. So first one, negative 7 times positive 3. I know I'm going to get a negative number because odds negatives equals negative number. Even negatives equals positive number. So I know I'm going to get negative 21. Letter B, I have positive 4 times negative 8. I have 1 negative, so it's odd. So I'm going to get an odd negative answer, 32. Negative 32. On letter C, 8 times positive 5. Everybody's positive. I don't even worry about my negatives. I get 40. Letter D, I have negative 8 times negative 3. I have 2 negatives, so that's an even number of negatives, so I know I'm going to get a positive answer, 24. Letter E, 25 divided by a negative, negative 5. I know I'm going to get a negative answer because I have an odd number of negatives. Negative 5, 27, negative divided by negative. I'm going to get a positive answer because I have an even number of negatives, positive 9. Letter G, negative 28 divided by positive 4. I have an odd number of negatives, so I'll get a negative answer, negative 7. Letter H, positive 30 divided by positive 6. I have an even number of negatives because they're both 0, so they're going to be positive 5. And last one, positive 45 divided by negative 3. I have an odd number of negatives. I have just 1 negative, so I'm going to end up with a negative answer, and that gives me negative, oh, that's wrong, not negative 9. Hang on. Negative 15. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to do your homework, the odds, and send a picture to Miss Fox. And again, let me know if anything is confusing you, because this is pretty important that you understand this.